Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Jones here. In this video, we are going to continue looking at tables and their equations and then their matching graph. And we're going to start to dive a little bit deeper into the actual equation and a bit of a formula that we can develop. So the very first thing on this slide is that I want to start to annotate my table so that I can create an equation. So I notice that my change in x is 2, and my change in y is 1. Remember doing that y over x, so I know that my coefficient is 1/2. I can also see really nicely in this table that my starting value is 3. So when I pull this all together, I get an equation of y equals 1/2 x plus 3. What I then want to do is I want to plot these points. So I know 0, 3 would be right here. I know 2, 4 is going to be right here, and I know that 4, 5 is going to be right here. I'm then going to draw a line to connect these points. So I'm going to put it at about here. And I always want to add arrows to the ends because this line goes on forever. Now, what we want to start to do is we want to examine where do we see our starting value and where do we see our coefficient on the graph. So you may remember, as we talked about briefly in class, that this point right here is our starting value. Notice it's where the line crosses the y-axis. That's an important piece to remember. Now, the place that we are going to see our our coefficient is actually in the difference between the points. So do you remember over here, we indicated that I was changing by 2? Well, do you notice as I go from one point to the next, I'm going forward 2 spots? Do you see that? Well, also, do you see how my change in y was 1? Do you notice that not only am I going forward 2, but I'm also going up 1 in both places? So we start to see our coefficient in these little triangles that we can build between our points. Let's try another one. I want you to first pause the video and tell me the equation of this t-chart. Okay, you're back. Hopefully you found the equation was y equals negative 2x plus 8. Again, our coefficient, or our starting value, is really nicely right here. And we can see that as my x values are increasing by 1, I can see that my y values are dropping by 2. Then what I want to do is I want to plot these points. And this is what my line will look like. Again, we always want to add arrows because the line goes on forever. Remember from the last slide that we see our starting value at where it crosses the y-axis. Now what I want to do is I want to start to examine where I see my coefficient. So I want to look at the triangles that I can create between the points. Notice that I'm going to go forward 1 spot here and then down 2, because remember our coefficient here is negative 2. Again, I can go forward 1 spot and then I'm going to go down 2. Let's try another one. So I want you to pause the video here and see if you can find the equation. Great, you're back. Hopefully the equation you found was y equals negative 1/3 x minus 2. Again, our starting value is really nicely in my table. Here, now that I annotate, I can see that my x value changes by 3 each time, and my y value subtracts 1 each time, which is how I get that coefficient of negative 1/3. Now what we want to do is we want to look at the graph. Again, I always want to add arrows because the line goes on forever. You'll see here is my starting value of negative 2, really nicely where it crosses the y-axis. Now I want to look at my coefficient and where I see it in the graph. So we're going to first look at our x. Notice here that as I go from one point to the next, I'm going forwards 3 spots. I'm then going down 1 spot. That's how I got my coefficient of negative 1/3. I can check it on the next triangle. I'm going to go forward 3 spots, and I'm going to go down 1 spot. Again, my negative 1/3. All right, so all of this comes together in a magical equation called slope-intercept form. And slope-intercept form is your new best friend. So this equation, y equals mx plus b, we're going to be using a lot of. So instead of referring to the coefficient and the starting value, we're going to start talking about m and b. Now, m is what we call a line's slope, okay? And b is what we call our y-intercept. So again, you've heard me talking about the starting value of where it crosses the y-axis. The starting value is now b, which is the y-intercept, which is where the line crosses the y-axis. The slope is, again, the line's change in y over change in x. So it's how the graph is changing as I read it from left to right. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it steep? Is it not steep? Etc. So now what we want to do is I want to see if I give you the equation, now can you start building the line? So we always want to identify our slope, which we see as 2/3, and our y-intercept, which we see as -2. Now remember that -2, that y-intercept is our starting value. So that's where it intersects the y-axis. Remember, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. So let's start by plotting that point. That's right here, -2. Now remember, my coefficient is going to help me build that triangle. And remember, our slope is that change in y over the change in x. So if I compare this fraction, it's saying 2/3. So that means my x value is changing by 3 and my y value is changing by 2. So what I can now do is I could start to build my triangle. And I'm going to say, okay, well, if my slope is 2/3, I am going to go forwards 3 spots. That's my +3. And I'm going to go up 2 spots. So my point will be right here. And that gives me a slope of 2/3. I can add another point. I'm going to go forward 3 spots, and I'm going to go up 2 spots. Here's another point. And I can keep going. I can continue to build these triangles, or other words, slope triangles, in order to create my line. Now I have enough points that I feel good about creating a line. Remember, we always add arrows at the end here to show it goes on forever. And there's my line. All right, here's another one. First things first, I want you to pause the video and I want you to identify the slope and the y-intercept. All right, you're back. Hopefully you identified the slope as 3/5 and the y-intercept as -4. Now, if you want to take a shot at graphing this, be my guest. If you want to go over one more together, keep watching now and don't pause. All right, so here's our graph. Now, I'm going to walk you through this. Remember, -4 is our y-intercept. That's where we're starting on the y-axis. In order for me to think about 3/5 as my slope, I want to build that triangle. I want to think, okay, this is my change in y over my change in x. So this means I'm going to go forwards 5 spots, and I'm going to go up 3 and add a dot. I'm going to build the same triangle again, going forward 5 and going up 3. Now, if you wanted to, go the other way. In other words, do the vertical first and go up 3 and then forward 5. Do I still get to the same point? Yes. So you just have to make sure that it doesn't matter the order that you were going in. You just need to make sure that the 3 in this situation refers to your vertical change, meaning going up and down on y, and 5 refers to your horizontal change going sideways left to right on x. Okay, how about this one? We see that our slope is -3/4. We see that our y-intercept is 6. So I know I'm starting at 6, and now my y-intercept is -3/4. So that means here that I'm going to go forward 4 spots, and then I'm going to go down because it's -3. So here's my point. I'm going to go forward 4, and then I'm going to go down 3. And there's a dot. And so then I can build my line. All right? Hopefully, this is starting to feel really good. I would like you to pause the video here and try this one on your own. Okay, you're back. So hopefully you saw that the slope is -3 and the y-intercept is 5. Hopefully you then build your equation like this or your graph like this. Remember, any whole number can be written over the number 1. So we can think about my slope as being -3/1. So then when I go and annotate and I try to identify that triangle, I can see that I'm going forward 1 and then down 3. Again, forward 1 and down 3. Okay. If we're thinking about our shapes and our patterns, remember this is saying that I'm going for every stage, I'm losing 3 shapes. I've started with 5, and as my pattern progresses, I'm losing 3 shapes each stage level. Okay, what I want you to do for this one is I want you to try to rearrange it. Remember, our slope-intercept form looks like this. Y equals mx plus b. Can you rearrange this equation to look like y equals mx plus b? And then identify the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, you're back. Hopefully you rearranged it to be y equals negative 7x plus 2. My slope is then negative 7, and my y-intercept is 2. When I graph this, remember that means I'm going to start at the 2. Remember, we can write any whole number as being over 1. So that means when I go and identify my triangle on my graph, that means I'm going forwards 1 and down 7. Okay? All right, last one. I would like you again to try to rearrange this. Remember, we want y equals mx plus b. So first try rearranging this and then graphing it. Okay, you're back. Hopefully you rearranged it to be y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. So that means that our starting value is 3 and my slope is negative 2/3. So when I graph this, I'm going to start at my y-intercept of 3, and then I'm going to build my triangle by going forward 3 and then down 2. Again, forwards 3 and down 2. Okay. If you wanted to build it back the other way, I wonder what you would do. How would I start to build points over in this area? How would I get backwards? Think about it. If I'm going forwards 3 down 2, how would I build back up to the left? I wonder what you think. Do you think maybe we would go back 3 and up 2? Do you think that could work? I wonder. All right, hopefully this is all making sense. If you have any questions, please let me know and do your best that you can on your homework and we'll go over it in class.